We are in Wisconsin in Door County, and just got a couple of thoughts standing here in front of this church watching snow fall. It's a beautiful winter day. And I've been saying this a lot when I preach and teach in different places, and I just wanted to share it with you because I think it's a really important thought, especially these days when there's so much talk of union and unity, but it's been so difficult to define. In the scriptures, Paul wrote 13 letters. One of the letters that he wrote was to a church in Corinth. Actually, two of the letters that he wrote was to a church in Corinth. And in 1 Corinthians 6, he makes this statement. He says, "Do you not know that you are the temple of the Holy Spirit, and that the Spirit of God dwells in you?" Now, the reason this is a really astonishing statement is because the church in Corinth had no Bible. They had an Old Testament. Paul is primarily going to Gentiles. That is, people who have no grid for what the Old Testament is even about. They can't get into a synagogue to hear the Old Testament read very easily. And so more than likely, they're never going to hear much of the Old Testament at all. That doesn't mean that the Old Testament is irrelevant. It just means that to the church in Corinth, it doesn't mean anything to them because they have no access to it. Okay, so let's just pull the Old Testament out of their dialogue. What about the New Testament? That hasn't even been written yet. The New Testament's not even a thing at this point. And they don't have the letters that he's writing to the church in Ephesus or the church in Thessalonica. They don't have access to that stuff. And so what do they have? And this is the question for the church in Corinth. Well, they have the gospel that Paul preached, and they have the witness of the Holy Spirit. Based on those two things alone, Paul had this realization and decides to form as a question this simple thing that he puts in front of them. Do you not know that you are the temple of the Holy Spirit, that the Spirit of God dwells in you? So without any Bible per se, and without any formal instruction, purely based upon the gospel that Paul preached, and based upon the witness of the Holy Spirit, Paul fully believed that these people ought to know that they are the home for the presence of God. Now, if we fast forward to today, and I think if Paul could drop down right here, a couple of thousand years later, and take a look in our churches, and see, see first off that we have the freedom to worship without any fear. That's kind of cool. Also, that we also have a access to writings that the early church never had access to. For example, we have the Old Testament, we have the 5 books of Moses, we have the Psalms and the poetry of David, we have the prophecies of the major and minor prophets, we have the wisdom of Solomon and the Proverbs, and then we also have the Gospels and all 13 of Paul's letters neatly packaged in genuine leather. And I think based on that alone, Paul would take a look at us and say, wait, you've had this for how long? Your entire life? A couple of millennia? And you still don't know that you're the temple of the Holy Spirit? So the big question I get these days whenever I travel around, the question I get more than any other is, how do I get close to God? And to that, I would say you need an Old Testament revelation that David got in Psalm 139, where he said, "Where in the world do I go to get away from you?" In other words, you can't find a place where he is not. And more importantly, with the coming of the Holy Spirit and the access that you and I have to his heart, we have the ability to actually recognize and experience the indwelling power of the presence of God within us. Every person watching this, no matter who you are, you have access to that. Just simply say, "Holy Spirit, fill me up with all of you. Fill all of me with all of you. Make me aware of my union with you. Make me aware of my oneness with you today." And here's the deal. In a world filled with so many questions, without answers it seems, the one who is the answer, the Spirit of truth meant to guide you into all truth, actually wants to reveal that truth to you. We have not because we ask not. So I encourage you today, what's the question you have that has no answer? Is it religious? Is it political? Is it about your church, your home, your family, your business? Ask the one who knows everything that there is to know about anything that can be known. And I promise you, he'll tell you perhaps more than you want to hear, more than you're ready to hear. And it's only through that interaction with the one who is the Spirit of truth that you and I ever will experience authentic unity. This is Bill Vanderbush. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me in my studio this beautiful lovely cold environment. And a special thanks to my incredible wife, Tracy, who is trembling holding this phone because it's cold outside. Okay, you can turn it off now.